Alright guys, we're back at it. Taking our example with the organizing the airstrike from earlier, we're going to go ahead and run through the air combat portion of that, and then we'll also talk about the actual strike portion on the 79th Rocket Artillery here. So if you recall, we had the MiG-31 and the Su-35 intercepting a MiG-29 escort with an F-18 Striker, an F-16 Belgian Striker, and an Italian Tornado Wild Weasel. So the Wild Weasel doesn't really provide anything from an air-to-air standpoint, but he will affect SAM rolls and excuse me, things of that nature later on. So the first thing that happens is we're going to go to a long-range combat round. So the only thing that can actually shoot in long-range combat is the MiG-31, and so he'll take on this escort right here, the MiG-29. So let's assume, for our purposes, that the long-range fire misses. So after that first round of long-range combat, the attacker, followed by the defender, can actually choose to abort. So obviously the attacker would not want to do that in this case because they outnumber the escorts. But if the defender were so inclined, they could take all these planes, put them in the abort box in the basing box, and be done with the strike. It might be the better part of valor, but in this case we're just going to continue on. So the next round after long range combat, well, let's go back to this. Long range combat is denoted by the 2 asterisks on the MiG-31's air-to-air combat value. Very few planes have it. Those that do obviously get a little bit of a benefit in air-to-air combat. So we go to standoff missile combat. So standoff missile combat is indicated by a single asterisk, such as the MiG-29. And of course, anything that has long range, the 2 asterisks also can fire in standoff. Now in this round, because there's only one escort, the Su-35 can choose one of these other planes to fire at, either of these Strikers or the Wild Weasel. Now because the Wild Weasel is actually a pretty valuable aircraft in terms of other game functions like striking in air defense tracks and things like that, he's going to try to take out the defense suppression aircraft rather than the Strikers. So for our purposes, we'll assume that the MiG-31 and the MiG-29 abort each other, and that the Su-35 takes the Tornado out. You notice the Tornado does not have a damage size, so if it takes one hit, it's gone. So that was standoff combat round, and again, both the attacker and the defender, in that order, have the option to abort, but again, for the purposes of this example, we're just going to continue on. So now the Su-35 is going to go into dogfight. If he dogfights the F-16, they'll fire simultaneously, and that's because in dogfight, you go in order of air-to-air combat value, highest first. So in this case, they're both 4s, and so they would be even. The F-18, on the other hand, is a 3, and he has a -1. So it would behoove the Su-35 to take that striker out in terms of trying to minimize the potential damage to the 79th, because that -1 will be a die roll modifier in the F-18's favor when he conducts the strike. So we'll go that way. So the Russian player knows that the F-16 is going to get through, but he's hoping to do some damage here. So we'll say the result flips the F-18 and aborts him, sends him off, and at that point, air-to-air combat is done from an interception standpoint. There's just the 3 rounds of combat, and over the F-16s sneak through. However, part of an early detection interception is always SAM fire. Now, if the Wild Weasel had still been here, it would have affected the SAM die roll and provided some benefit for the F-16 coming in. One other benefit the F-16 does have is that it can conduct a standoff strike, so the asterisk on the strike value, which is the 3 on the right, allows it to do a standoff attack. Against leg units, that's not so good, but here you can see the rocket artillery is a motorized unit, and so the F-16 will use standoff, and thereby it will avoid AAA fire. So let's assume that the SAM fire resulted with a +1 die roll modifier to the strike. There aren't going to be any other die roll modifiers. You can see them on the advanced strike table. They're right to the right of it. But what you do is you take this flat terrain that the rocket artillery is in. You find that on the left-hand side of the strike column. You go across until you find the strike value of the number, which is 3. So it's, let's see, 3, 4, it's 5 columns over, and you just go down. You can see that with no die roll modifiers, I need a 5 to inflict a strike 1 on the WMD. So you would roll the die, you would apply the +1 modifier from the SAM fire, whatever result you got, you would have, and then this F-16 would fly back to the flown box. And that's how strikes are conducted. Hope this helps. Thanks.